Hello, everybody. Welcome back to We All Have Stuff.
We're so
This is
excited today.
so excited. We have a wonderful guest with us for our 69th episode, which is just crazy.
Yeah.
Making really great progress. Been so wonderful to have all of our lovely guests. So today we have Meredith with us. She's a licensed clinical social worker in South Jersey, right?
Yeah.
Yay. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a lovely topic for you guys. We have a great expertise that we're going to be getting from Meredith. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice and your story, and then we can jump right in?
Absolutely. So, like Gabby said, I am a licensed clinical social worker in South Jersey. I just opened my own private practice last year. So, we're a little over a year in. But before that, I was working in a group practice. And then my background before that was substance use treatment. So, I'd
Wow.
been in substance use treatment for a long time. Thought that's where it would stay forever. And then COVID happened. And I think like for many people, that changed a lot of the trajectory of my career. So I
Right.
switched over to group practice.
Mhm.
And from then I started working with individuals and couples, which
Oh.
is now primarily what I do. In my practice, the connection space, I work with couples, individuals, complex trauma. I'm an EMDR certified therapist
Love that.
and trained in IFS informed EMDR. So I try to pull all that in
Mhm.
and be as relational as possible in the midst of all that trauma work. So that's kind of my professional background.
Yes, we
Wow.
love that.
Yeah.
I think what really stuck out with me when, we've been really trying to tailor our podcast lately to therapists because, there's a lot of therapists who give a lot of good information. And a
Absolutely.
lot of the stuff you talk about with like men's health and men in general, especially since our last podcast, we had like a veteran and he
Yes.
talked about like trauma and like, we know there's issues around, both genders, but men especially in mental health. So can you kind of speak to us about like how you got into that? Like why is that kind of the thing you got into? Or like what did you start seeing where that was like, oh, because as soon as we read that, we're like, oh my gosh, this information talk about is
Yeah.
like we need more people to
Necessary.
talk about that. That's
Yeah.
like talk about it more.
Yeah, it was totally by accident. So my first field placement as a social work student was in a substance use treatment facility in East Tennessee. So I was like fresh 21. I had not a clue what I was doing. And
Right. And you're like,
Mhm.
I don't know what's going on, but here you go.
yeah, they're like, good luck. And, like I'm like dumb and still learning. And they just threw me
Oh.
in with these adult men. And I'm
Yeah.
Yeah.
like, okay, this is
With
new.
like addiction. So you're
In
like,
addition, right.
wow.
And they're in
Right.
rehab.
Oh,
So they're like,
goodness.
we really don't want to be here. And I'm like, I
Right.
get that. I get that.
Right.
So I started working with men and I ended up staying um, at that agency actually for a couple years, well into the beginning of my career. And as I was getting my MSW, and I worked with men and I gained
Mm.
this reputation. I'm not really sure how of if there is an agitated, resistant, doesn't want to be here, grouchy old man, send him
Mm.
to Meredith. And I'm like,
Wow.
Oh,
so
I love that. You must have
yeah.
like such a good like
Energy.
vibe in the sense of like safety for that then.
And I think that's really where I realized safety is going to be the gateway to doing any work at all. Like
Right.
if you can
Yeah.
be relational, if you can make someone feel safe and, you can resist
Mhm.
treatment all you want, that's your prerogative, not mine, but you
Yeah.
still deserve to have someone who's going to listen to you,
Sure.
someone who's going to treat you with kindness and warmth and recognize, you're in this position and you're feeling vulnerable. So any
Yeah.
response you have to that is probably an adaptive response, right? So
Yeah.
as I've moved along in my career, I've stuck with men because I really enjoy working with them. And
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of, this is a generalized statement, but there's a lot of women who really don't like working with men because it can be
Yeah.
complex. And I think
Sure.
sometimes we have our own trauma histories that inform that.
Mhm.
And
So,
I would say, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like also like, there's that stigma where it's like I feel like men are more, not all men, but like they're more pulled. Like the what I see at least is like they're gonna go because like my wife wants me to go, or I don't know, my friend told me, but it's never usually like women are more like,
Self-motivated.
you know what,
Yeah.
I think something's going on. They're more willing emotionally to be like,
Yep.
I'll go talk to somebody where men are like, nope, there's a stigma, like that's not cool. Like there's not, I'm fine.
yes. And I actually have a theory about that. And I really think that's because when women don't take care of their mental health or they're navigating complex trauma, distress, it gets internalized and it harms
Mhm.
us. But
Yeah.
for men, it often becomes externalized and it harms others.
Oh,
So
yeah.
people are telling men, you need to go talk to someone because it's harming the people around them. Whereas for women, I think we have a different experience and we recognize like this in my body isn't working for me,
Yeah.
where I don't know that men have been socialized to attune that way. So I think you're right. I think there is this idea that men come into therapy and they don't want to be there. And that may be true, but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that they can't get something out of it. It's just a
Yeah.
slower process. So that's why I really like working with men and especially working with couples. You know, you see those dynamics play out. And if we can empower men, not give them power, but empower them to really start to find the language, attune to themselves, attune to others, that doesn't just change, you know, romantic partnership. It changes parenting. It changes how they show up in the workplace. It changes every single facet of their life. It's just, do we have the patience to sit with them while they get there?
I love that. I like
Yeah.
your little transition of, I think it's cool to hear different therapists and like, I think it's hard when you're younger and we're all like, what's your niche? And it's like, well, I don't know. And then you get into the field and then you figure out like, oh, this is what maybe these are the kind of people that are drawn to me and this is what I'm good at and this is what I'm figuring out. So I love your story of like addiction. And like you had said, like, not that, there's women, of course, we struggle in certain ways too. But when you think about addiction, a lot of other guests we've had on the podcast, like I think Gabby, when we're talking about like the veteran first responder stuff, like a lot of them have opened up like, yeah, the first thing us guys do is like, let's go, you do drugs or let's go get drinks or, you don't know that man's at home. Not that women don't do it, but you see it a lot in men where like that is the way they cope, right? It's either
Yeah.
anger or the stress and coping. So I love that like that became your thing from addiction to like, oh, I'm really good with men. So that's
Yeah.
cool.
And
I
I will
think it's
say, yeah.
been normalized too. Sorry, Gabby, not to cut you
Yeah.
off, but I
No.
even think like in media, I always think of Don Draper. Like he is this mysterious, cold man, and
Yeah.
people love him. And
Right.
so I just think about how that even shows up in the general population is we reward men for not feeling, but instead coping however they need to, as long as they're not feeling, which is
Right.
not
Yeah.
working for everybody, obviously.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, in hearing you talk, I will say, reflecting on my own male clients, I enjoy working with them very, very much. And I think it's because they have that desire internally that we want to reward, right? Like, hey, you're here. And they're so self aware. And it's so interesting because it's like, oh, let's foster this, let's nurture this desire to improve and be self aware. But how do you feel, especially having worked in substance abuse and, I've worked inpatient, I've worked kind of across the spectrum too. How do you feel that working with men is received as a female therapist? Because I have a lot of clients that are like, oh, well, is this going to work out? Because, like, you're not a guy. And, I think there's that desire for like women want to see women a lot of the time and men want to see men. But I do feel like a very good connection with my male clients, I think, because they don't get that like, bro, hey, man, from us. So, what's your perspective on how we can work together across, men, women relationships?
Yeah, that is such a great question. Um, I do a lot of attachment work, so I often pick up on these patterns that sometimes men are even seeking female therapists because they want some sort of maternal figure, right? So they think they're going to come into my office and be mothered. And, I can be warm and nurturing, but I also am going to be firm and I'm going to hold
Yeah.
you accountable. And there's something very reparative about having both. I can hold you accountable and I can be warm and nurturing and have this unconditional positive regard. And I also work with my own therapist who is a man. And a lot of people are like,
Wow.
oh,
Oh,
shout out
I love that.
Yeah. I love
to
that.
that. And so I think people are actually more surprised to hear that I see a male therapist than I work with men.
Yeah.
And, I think no matter what, we're seeking out almost like dating and relationships. We're seeking out someone who is familiar. We're seeking out patterns that are familiar. We're
Sure.
seeking to repair something, right? And play out trauma almost. And so I have had male clients or I've had couples where the husband, the partner who is a male, will want someone who is a man because they just get them. Okay,
Yeah.
fine.
Mhm.
That's totally fine. But I also think it further widens this gap on a really large scale of like men should only work with men, women
Right.
should only work with women, which there's benefits to that. But I also think it can further isolate women and men from one another instead of actually teaching like how do we repair these
Mhm.
dynamics in practice. And we can do that really easily in the therapeutic space because we're
Sure.
modeling all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Wow.
I'm interested because I know you said you see couples too.
Mhm.
And I know like when we read your information that you had given us, it's like you talk about like the cost of the relationship, right? So like I would love to hear like if you can speak more to that, like in relationships, many people I definitely think in our world today, especially where women are becoming more independent and like relationship things are shifting. Um that there is this like women want men to be more emotionally intelligent because they're more independent financially and like but men are like okay, what does that look like? So what would you say you see the most of the cost of the relationship or how it's playing out when men are struggling?
Yeah, I often will zoom out and look at the patriarchy as a whole because the patriarchy as a system has rewarded men for emotional containment. So,
Mm.
over decades, generations, we have socialized men to emotionally contain because then they are more productive within the patriarchy, right? So
Yeah.
we talk about first responders, we talk about the military. You can't really do your job effectively if you're watching people die and grieving in real time,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That's not going to work.
Right.
So we want that emotional repression. We want you to shove it down so you can perform. Where that translates into relationships is women don't want that in their partners.
No.
Relationships are not a job. So the relational cost is you've gotten really good at containment, but we lose that attunement and now we have no idea what's going on in that inner world and we can't
Mm.
connect through it.
Right.
So in
Yeah.
some ways, there has been this benefit, this reward. It's kept men in this very protected system. But like you said, now that women don't really financially need men, we can have bank accounts, we can have
Yeah.
divorces, right? We're looking for something more. And
Yeah.
some men have never had the language for what
Mhm.
they're feeling and experiencing. They've never been given the tools to identify that, externalize that in a way that's
Mm.
healthy. So sometimes when I'm getting couples in my office, we have to slow things down and go back. I call it emotional kindergarten. Like we're learning skills
Yeah.
sometimes for the first time, and it's not meant to be, condescending, but it
No.
is meant to speak to if we never learned this, we're
Mhm.
not going to know it now as adults. So we can go back and learn the basics because we can scaffold up from there.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's interesting you say that because it's, we know because we're therapists, but also we know we have listeners who aren't therapists. And, when we think about taking clients back, one of my male clients said this once, and exactly what you said, like you hit it on the dime because he was like talking about his history, really rough history, very macho masculine vibe, dad, mom, very submissive. And he has multiple businesses. So like he would come in and like, Alessia, but I know we talk about like the voices and all like my performance and all this like stuff I struggle with, but like, look where it's got me. Like, look at all the success I have. It's
Mhm.
obviously worked for me. And I'm like, valid in
Yes.
Mhm.
that part. Like,
Yeah.
everything can have a pro and a con. Things can work for you, but we have to see how they're working against you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's like exactly what you said
Mhm.
of like, but hey, you're about to get a divorce. So is it working there?
Right.
Right. Yeah. Well, I work heavily in the relationship space and divorce space too. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts in the relationship space also about like what is it specifically that men need help with that maybe they can't target or they don't see that doesn't really play out and come to light until their partner's like, I'm done. I've
Mhm.
tried everything. I've
You're in the top
communicated.
moment right there.
Yeah,
Woo!
like here
Yeah.
you are. We're here. We've hit critical mass. What is the underlying issue or what is the prohibitive factor for male partners, especially for the work that we do, not speaking to men in general, but what
Mhm.
do you see as the like epidemic here that's becoming a problem where relationships are just not working out? I mean, the divorce rates are crazy. Women are leaving left and right, partnerships, relationships here and there, despite getting on hands and knees and being like, do this, right? What is the issue?
I
I
think
know
the
that's a
issue,
complicated question.
like,
Yeah.
there could be so many issues. I
You're
Yeah.
like, wow, here's my list.
Yeah.
Let me start here.
My face top 8
Yeah.
issues.
Right.
Um,
Hey.
I think a big issue is we don't know how to find emotional safety, right? So many ways in which men's mental health or lack thereof manifests is in these very complex ways that are adaptive. So it's
Yeah.
all protective. And I think sometimes there's this gap in knowing, it's not protecting your relationships. It is protecting you and your nervous system, but
Yeah.
again, at the relational cost of your relationships. So I think when I'm working with couples, we talk about a lot emotional safety because if we
Mm.
don't have emotional safety, we're not going to be able to, one, pause and attune to our own
Sure.
nervous system, two, attuned to somebody else's nervous system unless it's coming from that place of hypervigilance. And now, what do I do in response to that instead of how do I just sit and be with it?
Yeah.
And I think it becomes hard to communicate when we're not feeling safe.
Yeah.
And I've experienced this in my own relationship. When I'm not feeling safe, my communication is so wackadoodle. And I'm like, girl,
Mhm.
you're a therapist. But
Yeah.
I have access to that information when I'm feeling
Right.
triggered.
Sure.
And I think we miss sometimes the first step in building that emotional safety or even recognizing what makes us feel emotionally safe. Because
Yeah.
for a lot of people, at least a lot of the clients I work with, because I do complex trauma work, they've
Mhm.
never had that before. So
Yeah.
this is all new territory. They don't know what that looks like. They don't
Mm.
know what that feels like. So if we can start to build that emotional safety, I think everything else comes after that. But if
Yeah.
we skip that step, then we're just working against defenders and protectors in
Mhm.
all of the work we're doing. So I would say that is like the biggest issue is
Yeah.
a lack of emotional safety. And I think for men, they don't even really have that with themselves because if we feel something, well,
Sure.
it's not what we're supposed to do. So
Mhm.
that can be very scary and very threatening. So
Yeah.
I think it has to go both ways. Can we build emotional safety in our own system and then also build that with our partner?
Okay, so I guess for the non-therapists who are listening,
Mhm.
when you're
Yeah.
describing someone feeling a need for emotional security with a partner, can you tell us the way that you would describe that to someone who's like, I feel like I can't do XYZ in a relationship, and you're like, that's emotional safety. How would you create like an image of what that is for these partners? Like, what is emotional safety, I guess?
Yeah, emotional safety comes from, I believe, the feeling of I can be honest without being shamed and judged.
Hmm.
I can be seen. I can be vulnerable. And I think vulnerability looks a lot of different ways. Sometimes I think there
Yeah,
is being vulnerable. We can share information that is sensitive and feeling vulnerable.
sure.
I'm
That's huge.
feeling not so safe and secure, but I also know I am safe and secure.
Hmm.
I also think a lot of emotional safety, especially in relationships, comes with the felt sense that the relationship can stay intact even through tension. Because
Yeah.
that's where a lot of
Oh,
people start to
that
like
hit
freak
me.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, yep,
And me
I
with my own
felt that.
abandonment stuff, I'm like,
Yeah.
working on that. But I think that's where a
Yeah.
lot of people like we get into conflict and all
Right.
of a sudden it's like, I'm not safe anymore. But
Yeah.
that's not always true. You
Right.
can be safe. You
Yeah.
can have a secure relationship,
Hmm.
attachment, even in moments of conflict.
Right.
Conflict is good. Conflict is intimacy.
Yeah. See
Yeah, I think
that
it's
right
it's
there.
more like I would say again, correct me if you disagree, because like anybody who's on here, we want you to push back. But like when I hear you say that, it makes me think about how do we keep couples when they're in arguments still being like we can still be connected. Like with my man, I know we have to work on this forever, but there's something like when I'm arguing and I'm like just pissed, but like he could just still come over and just give me a kiss on the forehead and walk away. And I'm like, I'm still pissed, but like we're good. Like I still feel
Yes.
good. Like I'm like, that was cute, but I'm so mad and like that. But there's something about that I've had to learn, like, oh, I need some type of like physical thing to happen to remind me like we're still good. Or else it's like my mind would go, right? Like, oh, whatever, maybe we're not going to be okay. And that's from my own historical stuff. But I think when we see couples, that's what's happening. Like you're replaying other relationships, your family history. Oh, we're in tension. This isn't good. Are we going to be good? And then your nervous system is just screwed at that point. So it's like, how do you get your nervous system calmed down and be like, I'm trusting that we're going to be able to figure it out. And that takes both of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is a great conversation piece because I think that's where a lot of people struggle. And a colleague of mine and I have actually in the last year written a workbook for couples. So that should come out hopefully soon.
Yay.
A workbook for couples to understand their nervous system, the nervous system of their partner, and how do we maintain connection when we're feeling dysregulated. So I think that this is a really great conversation to have as now nervous system conversations are starting to increase on TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah.
But early in my relationship, my now husband, but we were dating at the time, came from very, very different family systems. So I'm a screamer, I'm a yeller, I'll get into conflict. I'm Italian, I don't care. He is not that. He would get really shut down. That felt really unsafe for him. And he would not engage with me at all. And then that was my system. You're leaving me. You don't care about me, right? So we created a set of rules. It's still in my notes app in my phone.
I love
A
that.
set of rules for conflict. And that has always been the pillar of how we engage. So if we're not standing by those rules or those boundaries, one, we have enough safety where we can name that for the other person. But we also know that as long as we're playing by the rules, it's safe, right? So it's, we're not going to curse at each other. We're going to try really hard not to yell, no name calling, like all rules that help increase the safety in conflict. So we know as long as everybody's following the rules, we're okay. If somebody doesn't follow the rules, things happen, sometimes we just can't regulate in that moment enough, then we know it's okay to step away because we will always come back. That's an agreement too. If we need to like take 5, and this is usually like something I need to do for myself, I'll go and I'll get in my bed and like tuck myself in and take a couple deep breaths. And then, okay, I can try this again. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be emotionless, but we have to maintain some boundaries so that it feels like we have lanes to stay within and the car's not going to veer off the road.
Yeah.
Sure.
Would you say, I'm curious from your perspective of like, if I think about us women, there's kind of like some themes of like, there's some kind of language sometimes that we want, right? There's like verbiage that like we're like, if you would say it this way, I would feel better, right? And it's like men are like, it's not going to come out like that every time, which valid. Like we're never going to be perfect. But what would you say the theme is of like men? Like what do men ask for the most when us women might be like, sometimes I want a hug or I just want you to like practice this verbiage. What's men's maybe go to like this would help? Because men aren't the ones usually saying it out loud as much as us women are like, this is what I want and this is what I need and this would help. And women are figuring it out and men are like just maybe jumping on board like, yeah, I'll try all this stuff. But then it's like we can't forget about what do you need too. And I think sometimes men will be like still putting themselves to the side like, oh, I guess I'll work on this for my wife or my partner, but still not aware, well, hey, babe, you know what happens with me in the fight and you know what I need. And so is there a theme that maybe you see with men?
Yes. There's a couple things that I think come up often. One of them being, I want to feel heard. So no matter what words are coming out of my mouth, whether it's that perfect language or not, I just want to feel heard. I think another one is, I don't want to feel shamed.
Okay.
So if
a lecture, like women getting into their like mom, like you should be doing
Yes.
this vibe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I think, and this is again a generalized statement, so I won't say this is true for everyone, but I think a lot of men are often combating, am I good enough? And so when we come to them and we're asking of things, maybe we're not trying to be critical, but is that being internalized as criticism?
Yeah. Okay.
And does that land as shame? And so sometimes I'll slow things down in my sessions so that I can name that, right? I watch the shutdown start to happen, right?
Yeah.
Feeling good enough, I'm never going to be good enough. And I'll just stop things dead in their tracks and just name that, right? Everything is a criticism of you and who you are. Sometimes it's just how we feel. Sometimes it's just what we need.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just anger that's coming out or frustration. Can you hear that and not internalize that as something is wrong with you?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
there is this desire to be heard and to not feel shame.
Right. Yeah, when you say that, I think a lot about, in couples work and at least some of the work that I've done with men. It's like accountability is so hard because I feel that what we hear a lot with men is, okay, but I have to now explain why I shouldn't have to be accountable to your feelings, or I don't feel accountable for the things that you want me to be accountable for. So there's
Right.
like this cycle rather than, like you said, having that safety to say, I did that thing. It's not
Yes.
landing for me the way it landed for you, but like, okay, I'll own that I did that. Now, how do we move on from here? Where you
Yeah.
get in this cycle, I think, having done counseling, couples counseling myself, and having done couples counseling as a therapist, I think you see the blame game kind of starting. And it's like, well, so nobody's feelings are safe here because if
Yeah.
I take ownership, then you feel valid in feeling wronged. So then I'm at fault. But rather than ownership of, hey, we're both kind of playing this back and forth ball toss here, and maybe we're not feeling it the same way, but something's happening that's disruptive.
Yeah.
So, how can we like nurture that as we try to teach people who are listening about taking ownership so you don't hit that critical mass point of seeing like the full picture and zooming out? How can we take ownership for our role in the distress that's happening without ending up in this resent cycle? How do we get there?
Yeah, I think accountability is such a tricky word to even put
Mhm.
out there
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people hear accountability as admitting fault. And
Yeah.
that's not what it is
Yeah.
necessarily. But when we have enough safety, emotional safety, either in a relationship or in the
Mhm.
therapeutic space, it means I'm allowed to look at myself in
Yeah.
a really honest way. And
Right.
no one is perfect. So I
Mhm.
will often try and model that in my sessions. So I work with a lot of high conflict couples. If we have, I don't know, a big fight the week before and they come back in, first thing I'm going to do is try and initiate repair on my end and take accountability for if I did something wrong that
Mhm.
didn't allow for enough safety, or if I misstepped and activated something, I want to own that
Yeah.
because that's part of our repair.
Right.
Sure.
We can
Yeah.
feel like there's more trust. We can feel like if again there's tension in the relationship, it's still safe. And so
Yeah.
I try to model that as much as possible. I'm not a perfect therapist. I'm not a perfect
Sure.
human. And
Right.
Mhm.
so when I mess up, when I misstep, I'm like, perfect. Great
Yeah.
Yeah.
opportunity for me to take some accountability and model how
Yes.
that's just
Yeah.
knowing that I can be really honest with myself
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
share that with my clients.
Right.
Sure.
I love that.
Yeah.
So before we end, we like to kind of ask this
Yeah.
for all of our listeners. So if you could give like a tool, tips, tricks for anybody listening, especially on the topic of maybe men or
Mhm.
relationships when it comes to men, what is something if you could just put in somebody's pocket that would be like, I'm taking this information to give you. If you're going to look or want to know anything, this is what it is.
Yeah, I love that question. If anyone is interested in looking at content online that will help them understand maybe how to empathize with the experience of men or
Yeah.
uh, men in relationships, Terry Real. I'm a huge Terry Real fan. I always point my clients in that direction. Follow
Okay.
him on Instagram, listen to him on podcasts. I think he speaks so well to
Mhm.
Yeah.
experiences that many of us have, but
Mhm.
don't
Yeah.
quite know what to do with. And he does it in such a relatable way. So
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of Terry Real.
Great.
And I also will say, because a lot of people hear this out of my mouth, like we can hate men as an institution, but the more we hate them as
Mm.
individuals,
Yeah.
the more isolated they become. And that's when they start to fall into that red pill
Yep.
manosphere area, which is not what we want. That is going to
No.
continue to inflict harm on us too. So
Yeah.
I think it's that balance of, again, accountability without isolation, accountability
Yeah.
without shame,
Sure.
um, and
Yeah.
examining the role of the patriarchy in all of this, not just one man did something wrong and that's his fault. It's we have a really big
Like systemic.
systemic,
Yeah.
yep,
Yeah.
component to this that we as women are also victims to. So
Right. Sure.
I think there's a lot of value in even deconstructing what we know about the patriarchy and how that impacts the individuals.
Yeah. And I think I will say, like, with that in mind, it's important to recognize, like, we see that there are problems everywhere, right? We see that there's problems with the issues of attitudes towards each other that
Yeah.
are problematic just because of the society that we're in. And you being so willing to work with and dissect some of these issues, and us working with couples and enjoying working with male clients that come in like, help, you
Yeah.
know, it's not that this is a lost cause by any means. This is a situation where, if, like you said, we can zoom out and say, like, we're setting each other up for failure a lot of the time.
Yes.
And, if we're willing to be introspective and reflective and fix some of the issues, then we can get there, right? I
Right.
think that's where we're all on the same page, like, you
Yeah.
know. So, yeah, I love that, and I appreciate you as a woman working with men and giving perspective, because it's such a population that is like screaming for help and attention, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for being on here. We've enjoyed you. And
Yeah.
whenever you get that workbook done, send it to us so we can like link it to stuff so people can
Yes.
get access to it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It should hopefully be coming out in the next couple of months. So
Ooh, so
um,
excited for
I'm
you.
excited for there to be a tool for couples like this, because I know so
Yes.
many of us really want something like that.
Yes,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
100%. We love that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks
So,
for joining us and giving us so much amazing information. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Of
yay.
course.
And so we
All
will see
right.
you guys next time for our next episode. We all have stuff. Love you
All right.
guys.
So next time, listeners.
Bye.